once you get Picard down to the planet and he's talking to Soren about this stuff, um, you get a kind of a real. First of all, they talk about the Borg, so it's interesting that the movie is mentioning a lot of other Trek lore things, and you get into this sort of meaty conversation about time as a predator that's stalking you your whole life, and that's really his worldview or his universe view. And Picard is saying, mortality is like part of our existence. It defines who we are, and I think that's really having that debate, that intellectual debate has, again, I think they could have gone into it a little bit more. But I found it really interesting as a way to bring it up.
The only way that I
But
can make the Nexus kind of being inside the Nexus make sense to me is that it's not really like Picard isn't making a reality. Like it's not like the best version of his life. It's just what his life could be if he had made a different choice. Like if he had done things differently, then this would have been what he'd be experiencing, right? It's the same thing with Kirk, right? If he didn't leave Antonia, this is what his life would have been, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's kind of what I think for my own satisfaction is what's happening there. They just didn't explain it properly because they're like, well, it's whatever you want, it's candy and unicorns, if and wishes, right? But it's not, right? Because Alan's right. Like, is Kirk gonna, is his dream life chopping wood outside and burning eggs? Like I don't, I that can't be, right?
And the thing to me that didn't make sense, which is kind of a little bit aside from what we're talking about, is when Kirk gets into the hand to hand combat with Soren right before the everything goes to hell. I'm like, Soren is such a good fighter, and I'm like, I thought he was a scientist. How is he like doing like all this jujitsu and stuff?
I don't know. I
And
don't
he
know.
beats the shit out of Picard. And he
and
beats the shit out of Kirk, and he fights them both at the same time at the end. And I'm like, how he like? What's his backstory? Why does he know how to do this stuff? And it makes zero sense to me.
and how can he have a phaser disruptor with the most sophisticated looking sight that I've ever seen in Star Trek, and he misses every shot he takes. He's like has this like it's like, and he missed. Like he clearly could have like took Picard out when he's like crawling through those rocks.
Because the barrel is on the side of the
Somehow
gun.
he
It's
missed.
not like where he's actually looking. It's over here. It's like,
But it makes it look like it's super fancy. Like it's
I
like, oh,
know.
this sight is like really high tech. It should like hit exactly what it needs to, and it never does.
Okay, let's talk about the battle, because the battle and the eventual saucer separation and the crash, to me that's the whole movie. We've been talking about this for an hour, and now let's get to the juicy stuff. Let's get to that battle, and the way that I think it's really well done. It kind of makes the movie, I like the idea that they capture Geordi and they patch into his visor and they can see everything he's seeing. And then I love that they follow him to engineering and they see the shield frequency. That was good writing right there. And now what doesn't make sense is, what does it mean to change the frequency of a torpedo? Like a phaser makes sense because it's a beam, so you can change the frequency of the beam. But the torpedo is an actual object. So how do you change its frequency? So whatever. I don't know. What do you guys think about the battle and the setup and
Huh.
all that stuff? Namir.
I don't know. I'm thinking about that frequency question now because the frequency thing always confused me. Like, I don't, just because the initial frequency, can't they just change it? Like, don't they?
Well, that's like, yeah,
Well,
when he looks away, and can he just remodulate the shields? And then
Yeah,
it's
like
like
that's,
one torpedo gets through. It's like, well, okay, we got to remodulate the shields.
yeah, but
yeah,
let's just turn this dial a little bit.
they should know how to do that, because it's come up a bunch of times in Star Trek already of remodulating the shields.
Or it just happens automatically, right? Like, shouldn't it? You know what I mean? What they should have done was probably, like every starship has like a command code or something, where you can take it over if you know the command code and that's listed somewhere. that would have made much more sense if they had just figured out a way to get the command code and then
yeah, but then it would have been too much like Star Trek 2. It would have been like, oh, it's the same gang Star Trek 2. What I liked was that I liked the frequency thing. It's just that then there was our character should have been smarter and remodulated the shields. They kind of were like, how are they doing this? We don't know. And then they used the frequency modulation gag again because it turns out that the ion engine on the bird of prey is at and they're trying to figure the frequency of that so they can reset the whatever thingamabobby to stop the cloaking device, to reset the cloaking device.
Yeah, cross-eyed thinking about this.
Yeah. but it's like a lot of frequencies stuff going on during that whole, but the battle, well, you guys talk about the battle. I'll say my thing after, but you guys talk about the battle. Alan, talk about the battle. What did you think of the battle? Pew, 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 pew.
It was sad that the D went down so easily. Like to an old junky bird of prey, like it would have been cool if it came up against something, formidable. Like that's what I always felt like they did the Enterprise D dirty by having it taken out by that method that ship. Because I'm like, it would have one thing, if it was a Romulan warbird or like a Borg cube or something, that took it out. But just to have this old junky beater of a Klingon ship just get a lucky pot shot because they knew the shield frequency. It's kind of a sad way for the Enterprise to go down. That's why it's nice that they brought it back, in at the end of Star Trek Picard, and then they kind of got its like second chance to be a superhero.
Well, it occurs to me in this movie. Well, it's interesting for a movie that's thematically about death and impermanence and loss. There's lots of loss in this movie. Kirk dies 2 times. The Enterprise is destroyed. But it occurs to me that Star Trek doesn't do killing off of main characters or of important things very well, at least at this point. And it reminds me specifically of the way they kill off Jadzia Dax at the end of the season 6 of DS9, because earlier in that same season, there's an amazing episode. I don't remember the name of it, but where Worf and Jadzia are on a mission.
Change of heart.
And and he has to decide. She gets injured, and she's in the middle of the jungle, and he has to decide whether he's going to leave her to basically die by herself in the forest, or does he can accomplish a mission. And he obviously decides for her to save her and not do the mission, which is a great moment for Worf. But it would have been way more interesting as a death for her and a moment for Worf for that to be her death. As opposed to like 5 episodes later, it's just like she randomly gets zapped by like
murdered,
pot race, blah blah blah, whatever. And I don't care about that stuff. And it's the same thing with this movie. Is like the Enterprise gets destroyed from like this little, dipshit like bird of prey with these Duras sisters that are not like a big deal in terms of villains. And then Kirk like gets killed by Soren, who's like is that level of villain. And so. Anyways,
he doesn't even get killed by Soren. He just kind of falls.
Yeah, he gets killed by a bridge.
Right. Okay, so Amir, what do you think of the battle? Do you have thoughts about the battle?
I don't really, because it's not really that interesting. Like it's fine, but it's not like a classic space battle, right? Like there's no tension really. It's really just a quick kind of shield frequency. Oh, the torpedoes are getting through. That happens in every single, and then they find a way to kind of get out of it in some clever little hack, which everyone should have known about at this point because they've done it so many times. So it just didn't land for me. Because it wasn't, they weren't building up any tension, right? They weren't doing a little bit of back and forth, like put a ship in a nebula, have a little bit of cat and mouse, like do that thing that they did in Wrath of Khan or that episode that I love from Strange New Worlds, whose name I can't remember, where they treat them like they're submarines. That's like a real space
Memento
battle.
Mori.
There you go.
It's your favorite episode. You should just remember that one.
It is. No. That's why I have you guys. I don't need to remember episode titles. That's what you're here for.
Well,
But that's what I like. So it's a bit of like a non-starter, right? Like it's not the battle that counts in part of as part of that whole sequence. It's the crash. It's the destruction of the Enterprise. That's the main part of it. The battle is just getting them there.
well, I'll say, and of course, everything is like colored by my initial experience of having seen it at the Uptown Theater. But that battle, and they were able to finally do things that they can never do in the TV show. And there was a couple of awesome moments where panels are exploding and people are flying. And there was that one in particular where the guy flies over Wharf or something and over the horseshoe, and the other guy, the pilot, gets like blasted out of his or her seat. I can't remember. And then Riker's like, Deanna, take the helm, and she's like runs over and takes the helm and get us out of orbit. All that stuff is great. There's these great little moments, and then when they blow up the bird of prey, and then you have Data doing a yes kind of. All these little gags are great. And
You
I
see
like
the
that
guy,
stuff.
the red shirt in the back. He's
Yeah,
like
I saw
also
that.
trying it's like, don't try to be Data.
Don't steal his thunder. And
Yeah.
right next to him was like another guy in a red shirt with this like giant grin on his face. Everybody else is like somber. And he's like,
I know. I mean, I always find that weird in Star Trek, because in Star Trek it's all about like compassion and humanity and the all that sort of stuff. But then whenever they blow somebody up, they're like, yeah. And they're like, you just killed 150 people.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of those guys were maintenance workers.
Yeah.
But then we
they
got
just handled the
a
cargo.
coolant leak. We get Jordy with his coolant leak next.
Yeah.
That's
Why
when
didn't
it really
they-
ratchets up the. That's when it ratchets up the excitement.
Why didn't
Yeah,
they
The battle
eject
is
the?
like,
Why didn't they
No, 'cause
eject
they-
the core?
Coolant leak.
They didn't have enough time.
What, you weren't listening? That
I was excited about the coolant leak.
There was a
the-
coolant leak.
The warp core ejection service was out of order.
They just did a recent
It's
Windows
like, there's
update.
nothing I can do, and he does his rolls. Oh yeah, it's so great.
And it's funny because I find it, there's the other things in this movie that are like this, but that one is reminiscent. That scene is very reminiscent to when the Enterprise blows up in yesterday's Enterprise. It's very, very similar. The same thing where Geordi's down in the engineering, and he's in his coolant leak and all that stuff. But it's great. He rolls underneath the doors there. Now, what we haven't talked about and just we can do a parenthesis right here, is the redesign of the Enterprise. That they add a bunch of things on the bridge. So one thing they add on the bridge is seats and consoles on the side, which is really interesting. And then everybody in the middle is kind of elevated. And I don't know why
like Worf looks weird now when he's sitting in a chair. He doesn't.
Yeah,
look
he's suddenly
very
after
imposing
7
anymore.
years they decided to put a chair there. Like, what the hell?
I know, it's like he doesn't look imposing anymore. He's just sitting at his desk.
You know why I thought? You know why I thought they put a chair there was so that when they crash, they'd have a scene where everyone's like, and they just didn't do it. Like, there's no seatbelts on.
They learned about
on the
seatbelts
bridge.
after this movie.
I know. And there's like
They put
multiple
that
shots
inside
of
the
people like
next one.
flying through, across the bridge and the impact, and there's literally a scene where everybody moves forward. And
There's going to be a lot of soft tissue injuries.
yeah, I know. I'm like, you just put a seatbelt on.
But the other interesting thing, I don't know if you guys noticed, but so the engineering set, the way it was designed inside the studio, is that it could double. It could be the engineering with the little pool table like console, but then they would take it out and it would become like a little space lounge. And sometimes you'd see the shot of them walking through the little space lounge and down the hallway. But that meant that the hallway would need to be covered up by a big wall console, which they always did in the show. But in the movie, they decided to take out the wall console. So now there's a hallway that goes right into engineering. Did you guys notice that? And it always kind of now
weird.
throws me off. Like, why is there a hallway there?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. But
I don't know.
They made all these little changes like that. I'm like, why did they make those
because
changes?
it's like, and then on the bridge there's like steps in front of down to the helm.
Yeah.
because I noticed that because when everybody goes flying, like Worf like smashes his face in the steps and Riker smashes his face in the steps. I'm like, bet you wish you just left the floor there now. And there's like all those new workstations on the
Well,
either side of the bridge.
they always have to change things up for like a movie, right? Like even in
But it
Picard's,
seems a little
The
random.
the
but
bridge look much busier than it did in the TV show. Like
yeah, it's
Mhm.
true. But it's also like the
it had more
lighting's all
authority.
different. In Picard's ready room, there was that crazy lighting where you could see a shadow on the wall, which I thought was a cool effect, but you don't see it in the show, right? It's always just like evenly lit, etc. There's something about taking a TV show to, the big screen where you have to like, ratchet it up. You got to make it more realistic, right? You got to put stairs on the bridge. Like I don't know why.
Okay, let's talk about the most important part of the movie that I've been waiting to talk about the whole time. This is the most important issue to talk about. It's the uniforms. What the hell's going on with the uniforms?
Have they gradually phase out the TNG ones and start wearing Deep Space Nine Voyager jumpsuits?
Yeah, what happened there? I don't understand. Why half people wearing the Deep Space Nine outfits and half the people are wearing the Next Generation outfits?
The
Because
quartermaster's
initially I
very
thought
busy.
I thought initially what was going on was that was the week they decided to switch things over, and so then and then because Picard starts off with his regular uniform and then switches to like the other uniform, and the same thing with Geordi. He starts off with his regular uniform and switches over, and Data and so on and so forth. So I go, oh, okay, that was just, I guess this was the day they were going to switch, and we just happened to be the day that this is happening.
Yeah.
But the other thing was what I never understood is that obviously both uniforms exist, because if you watch Deep Space Nine, when they're on the station, they're wearing these kind of jumpsuits, but whenever a ship shows up, they're wearing the old TNG uniforms. So then what that implied to me was that, oh, there's like spaceship uniforms, and then if you're on a space station and you're like roughing it out, you get these little jumpsuit uniforms. Like you're not on a different kind of operations or something. Anyways, I would like to hear your thoughts, Namir.
Yeah, I have no thoughts on the uniforms. I could not care less. I really
And the
couldn't.
ladies never got theirs. I don't think Crusher or Troy ever wear the new uniform. They wear
No,
like
no.
the blue TNG one till the end.
Right. And the other thing is that if the whole point was that they were switching over, then Picard at the end of the movie is back in his regular uniform. So then that
It
shoots
was the only
that.
clean one he had. Did you see? He was fighting in the middle of the desert. He was all sweaty. His new jumpsuit was all like gross. So he had to go back and wear his other one.
Do you know, this is like an interesting piece of trivia. Do you know
Starfleet
that
only sent him one new uniform. He's like, it's dirty. Now I gotta wear my old one again.
You can't replicate anymore. That's it. He's got a
they don't
quota.
have replicators.
No,
No.
you gotta go for the quartermaster.
They're tailor made in Savile Row. So, that what I find interesting about Riker's uniform is that because Paramount was too cheap, Riker or Jonathan Frakes is wearing Avery Brooks's uniform, and that's why he has to roll up his sleeves because he didn't have the same arm length as Avery Brooks.
That's why it
He did
fits
look
so
kinda weird in it.
horribly. Yeah, I was
does
like,
look
that
weird,
doesn't
yeah.
look right on him. There's something off. That makes
It
sense.
was like they got Avery Brooks's spare uniform. And they're like, "You wear this now." And I was like, "What? Why? Like, why? Everybody already had a uniform. Why they do?" Anyways,
Yeah,
it makes this movie very unique visually because everybody's kind of all over the place. And then you also have John Alonzo, who's the famous cinematographer, doing the cinematography, and that's why you get all those like crazy shots of like the sun coming in. It's very, very dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any thoughts about the uniforms, Alan?
Well, I thought it was weird too how like the background people even have the older style, like early TNG, like season 3, season 4 kind of uniforms. So there's even because I mean the background people always had like a tighter uniform with like the zipper, and then the rain cast had the more baggier, ones they always had to do the tug on. But yeah, it was weird. And those guys never got any new uniforms throughout the whole movie. It was only the senior staff and only the male senior staff. So it was weird. It was a weird choice to do. Like, I don't know why they just didn't go with. I don't know if they thought that they were like kind of moving into Voyager because they got a starship crew that has that style. I don't know what their intent was with it. Yeah, it was a weird creative call.
Namir's finished talking about this. Okay, let's go back to battle. Pew 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 pew. Saucer separation. I love the saucer separation sequence. That's really good. There's that little moment where Jordy gets to save the kids, and then the kid drops her teddy bear, and she's like, "My teddy bear."
Yeah, but they never go back to get it, which is like
it's supposed to be tragic.
No,
that teddy bear is gonna blow up.
It's like a Chekhov's gun kind of thing. You're like, what happened to the teddy bear? You set up the teddy bear and nothing happened. You didn't even show it explode. Blow up. But they kind of show it like on fire or something, or floating in space like the bottle.
Sorry, not to get sidetracked again, but the other example of like cost-cutting measures is when the bird of prey blows up. They just reuse the footage from Star Trek 6.
Oh man, it's so bad.
It's so bad.
Why not? Like from the movie right before that movie, and all the shots of the Klingons getting blown around.
But who cares? Like, I mean, it's all the same stuff. How many times can you shoot the same thing?
But it was like from the
how many birds of prey have blown up?
It was literally the last movie. Like if it was like from another like 6 movies ago, maybe we wouldn't notice. But it was like literally the last movie. The climaxes are identical for the exploding of the enemy ship.
And the thing is, they could have just flipped it, and it would have already looked that much different. That's like that's old technology. How much would that have cost for them to just flip that shot?
I think they just spent so much in that crash sequence, which is gorgeous and wonderful, that they didn't. They said, "We're gonna cut some costs here." And
I remember when the warp core blows up and the ship, the saucer gets pushed into the planet, and I remember again watching at the Uptown with like 700 Trekkies. In that moment where Data says, "Oh shit!"
I know.
Everybody went bananas.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, he swore."
He swore.
It was like TNG's first swear.
Yeah. But also it was like he was saying what everybody was thinking, because you see it, they're being pushed towards the planet, and then we're all going like, "Oh shit!" And then he says it, and I just that's like the best part of the movie right there. Every time, it's so good.
That whole sequence is so good.
And then you have this amazing crash landing, which is taken from the technical manual, the Star Trek Next Generation technical manual, where Michael Okuda did a whole diagram of the saucer separating and landing on a planet, or crash landing on a planet. And I remember seeing that before the movie came out, and I was like, "Ooh, that's cool." And then so when I saw the saucer separation crash, I'm like, "Oh, it's like in the technical manual." And then you guys were talking about, they really did that. They built a big saucer section, and they put it on the back of a Jeep, and they drove through a landscape, and they filmed it with high-speed cameras, and then just played it not backwards, but in slow motion. And it's so good.
So good.
Yeah.
But it's funny when I remember for some reason the saucer section heading towards a cliff, and obviously that doesn't happen. But I guess it's just such a trope that it always happens that I just remember it happening, but it doesn't happen. And now I kind of wish they were heading towards a cliff and gets to the edge and then teeters, and then everybody has to run to the back of the saucer section to get it to go back up again. But that never happened.
Oh, that's so good.
But then it was kind of cheap too that they I know it was a cool scene, but then they kind of reuse it when Picard does his little time jump. And it's like, oh, they gotta milk that money they spent on the crash sequence and just show it again. Like it's like, oh yeah.
Okay, Picard fails at beating Soren.
Oh man, Picard's
and
so bad at fisticuffs.
I was
Fighting hand to hand is not his thing.
I was
I
watching
think
this.
is this only the second time he actually punched somebody? Because I feel like he punched a terrorist in like season 3 when they got those terrorists beaten on the bridge.
he punched that Ferengi in Captain's Holiday too.
That's right.
Okay, so he's punched a couple people, but he really doesn't do a whole lot of hand-to-hand combat, and it shows.
No, because he's old.
Yeah, I remember I
He's
was
not
watching
old.
it with.
He's like your age in this.
No, he's in his 50s. Oh wait,
He's like early 50s.
right, that's true. I was watching this with
Mind
my
you,
daughter, and my
I don't think
daughter
Lucas
was
would
like,
do well in the fisticuffs either.
No.
What were we gonna say, Namir?
I was gonna say I was watching it with my daughter, and she was like doing something else at the same time, but watching it. And she looks up and she's like, "Oh, look, two old men fighting," and then goes back to what she was doing. I was like, "You're not wrong. You're not wrong."
Geriatric fisticuffs.
Yeah, exactly. And later on, there's two old men fighting again, but it's different two old men.
Yeah. 3 old men fighting at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the best. What we've been all wanting to talk about is the fantasies, the Nexus fantasies. So let's talk about Picard gets sucked in by the Nexus, and he goes into, it's Christmas morning, and he's surrounded by his children.
In like 1698, I don't know.
Yeah, his Victorian era children.
Yeah, it's like, what is with these costumes and this decor? Oh, it makes no sense.
Hello, Papa.
Papa. King Charles has sent a messenger by horseback.
I know, it's like, why would your fantasy look like everybody's from like 400 years in the past? I don't understand.
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that what you were saying earlier, Alan, about, I don't know what it is about the writers, but I don't know if it says something about the writers or how the writers feel about the characters, but all the characters have boring hobbies. And they have boring fantasies. It's just like, I want my fantasies to have a family and Christmas morning in the most like boring like movie version of a Christmas morning ever, where everybody's like, "I love you, Papa. Thank you so
for
much
the dolly. Thank you for this porcelain doll." I'm like, what? These kids would want gizmos, wouldn't they? Would they want toys? Like I want a the latest Game Boy or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, Picard's like, "Don't lick it. That's lead paint."
I got this antique doll. Oh, yay. I could imagine giving my daughters an antique doll and having them. Like, what the hell is this?
They just smash
they
it.
Just throw that. Yeah, they were like, next.
Yeah. Santa. There is no Santa.
But yeah, I didn't get it because it was like, I thought about it. I was like, it'd be like me fantasizing that, I wish I had Christmas morning with, Mary Queen of Scots or something, like somebody from like 400 years. And it's like, I don't understand.
Yeah,
these people are
it's so dumb. It's so dumb. No wonder he was like, "I think I need to leave," because he didn't want to be there in the first place. Where am I?
Yeah, well, I think the main problem for me, and we'll talk about some more, but is that his fantasy is so non-specific, and what I mean by that is. What I find really interesting is the way it's filmed is that you see the hand of his wife and she says cup of Earl Grey or something like that. And he grabs the hand and then the camera tilts up to reveal. And it's like the way it's shot, you're like, oh my God, who is it going to be? And then they do up and you're like, oh, it's that ensign from The Lost. That's who that is.
What?
Yeah, it's... What is it? In the episode "The Lost" from season 4, there's an ensign who comes in and is talking about her husband dying and how sad she is and blah blah. And then
right, yeah,
is that her?
Yeah, and so and Troy's like, you got over.
Why wasn't it Crusher? It should have been Crusher.
It should have been Crusher.
It should have been Crusher, exactly. And that's so interesting. I mean, we've been. Rewatching season 1, and it's so obvious now that they've been really building up season 1, sort of the romantic tension between Crusher and Picard in season 1, and they even addressed it in season 7, and it would have been perfect. I mean, and they were talking about it in the last. They were addressing it also in the last episode because they was married in the future and all this stuff, and it would have been so good if that would have been.
I know they already.
Crusher.
Gates McFadden already had nothing to do with this movie. Like that.
She had nothing to do with this movie.
Would have been cool.
Yes.
But nope. Just random people dressed up like Victorian England.
Well, so it turns out that actress's name is Kim Braden, and Kim Braden is David Carson's wife, and David Carson directed this movie. So that's how she ended up in that role. And she's great in the role, but she should have been Dr. Crusher. and then they could have had Kim Braden could still have been there, but she could have been, some other character.
The Help.
Well, she could have been the ensign. That ensign talking about losing her husband. She could have showed up. You know what it should have been? This is what I was thinking about while I was watching it. Is that it should have been Crusher going to see Picard in his quarters instead of Troy, and Crusher being like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "I don't want to talk about it." And she's like, "You never talk to me." Blah blah blah. In this very emotional scene where they have a fight basically. And then he's afraid of like losing her forever, or blah blah blah, and he's like all distraught. And then you got this scene in the Nexus, and it's been like so good.
Yeah, but the problem is nobody likes Crusher more than they like Troy, right? Like Troy is, everyone's like, yes, Troy. With Crusher, you're like, that's just Crusher, So it's
Crusher.
not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that, but Troy has always been the more like the character with more traction with the audience, right? Like, so I think that's really it.
I think according to you, I used
We
to live
also
with somebody
didn't talk about
who hated Troy all the time. So my impression is people hate Troy and like Crusher. But Alan,
Well, I don't know about that.
I'm just saying we also skipped over that scene with where Picard has his photo album out and is talking to Troy about the death in his family. Which I like Picard's acting in that, like Patrick Stewart's acting in that, but the writing is so odd. Like, I found it weird that when he says, I just think about all the things Renee will not get to experience, like listening to music and reading books. I'm like, the guy's 13 years old. I'm sure he's listening to music and read books. And then it's like, but then he does say like fall in love. Like that's the things you would think. Like, oh, he's going to miss out on having children and having a career and seeing his kids grow and falling in love. But it's like that's what he comes up with. Like, oh, he's never gonna listen to music or read a book. I'm like, you just ruined this scene. It could have been so powerful, but you made this kind of stupid line for Picard to say, and it was very.
Well, the other thing which is hilarious is like they have this old timey photo album. And then when you look at the pictures, they have this like kitschy like hologram border because it's like the pictures in the future.
Yeah, it's like it's the same thing as Battlestar Galactica, where everything in the future is from the future because they cut off the corners.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Their playing cards are all like hexagons.
Yeah, like it's the future. Look, nothing has a corner. It's all.
But it's not the future, Namir. But anyways.
Oh, don't ruin it for people.
Okay, and the other thing I noticed, and it's funny, this is the first time I ever noticed this, but I was watching that Nexus scene with Picard, and I realized that one of his kids is that bratty kid that's in Star Trek Voyager. You know what I'm talking about?
The blonde one.
Oh,
the blonde.
His whole fantasy looks like it's right out of Janeway's gothic novel.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Maybe it's like, what sets are available? What's Voyager shooting at the same time? Let's just use that for this.
Well, in that kid, I realized that actor, and he ended up being that creepy shapeshifter in season 3 of Picard. Who won't? They're torturing the shapeshifter, and he melts or something.
Oh,
that's a little kid. Anyways.
Oh
wow!
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, so the last part of it is going back to the Nexus. Guinan talking about you're going to be there. You're never going to want to leave. You want to stay there forever. And it takes him about 3 seconds to look out the window and be like, "There's something weird about that Christmas tree. I must leave now."
It's like
That's
there's a
the
supernova in that Christmas bulb.
Yeah, they don't ever really explain that, right? Like it looks like the sun's exploding, right? Like the Soren thing, but why would that even be there?
It's
well,
I don't
Picard
really get it.
remembering he has important work to do elsewhere. It's like don't get sucked in by the joy.
I guess.
Yeah.
it's so easy for him to leave, and I think it would have been such a more interesting, moment for his character if whatever his fantasy was really pulled him in, and it was impossible for him, or nearly impossible for him to give it up, and it could have been so poignant,
Naked Crusher.
Then Wesley walks in, Mom!
New dad?
New dad, but also old dad? I knew you were my father this whole time.
Anyways, do you guys have any thoughts about this, the how easily Picard gets out of his fantasy?
I mean, other than it's lazy,
It's super lazy.
yeah, it's really lazy, and I'm not actually convinced that this is his fantasy, right? Because and we can talk about it when we get to Kirk, but I actually don't think that Picard wants a family, right? Like I don't think that's his like deepest, darkest desire. I think he's doing what he wants to do.
Well, nobody said it has to be a dark design, Amir. Jesus.
Well, it could be. Who knows?
Well, I just think it's foremost in his mind right now because he's the last Picard. I think he
but
he
that's
says
not the.
he typically didn't worry about having a family because he had his brother and his nephew, and he didn't have to worry about it.
I know,
He's
but
just going to be a spaceman.
But that's not what the Nexus is about. The Nexus is about joy, right? It's about the thing that gives you joy. And I'm not 100% sure that having, 4 Rugrats and in a Victorian home that's drafty is the thing that's going to give him joy, right? Like I just don't buy it.
I remember you mentioned this on the Where No One Has Gone Before, because we were talking about the same thing about the fantasies people were having there, and you were like, I don't know about these fantasies, they don't make sense to me. But you mentioned the generations, but okay, so let's talk about Kirk, because his fantasy is he's chopping wood,
and sorry, just to jump in,
such
like
a joy-filled activity.
Well, and it's even worse with Kirk. 100%, that's not his fantasy. You know what his fantasy is? Being captain of the Enterprise. That's what he wants to do. That's what he always wants to do. They set that up at the start of the movie.
But yeah, exactly. There's a big, he should have been back on. Oh, that would have been so good.
That's right.
Because Picard would have gone there and he would have been on the ship.
That's right. Exactly.
My God. And then Spock and McCoy would have been there. Everybody would have been there.
Yeah.
So good.
I know, because that's what Kirk wants to do. That's what gives him the most joy in life. Not chopping wood on a farm with somebody named Antonia who we've never met before.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. There's so many other past romances. Like, could be Carol Marcus. It could have been Ruth. It could have been anybody they mentioned in the original. That didn't make up a new lady that we don't have any emotional investment in.
Yeah, and that's obviously not how he wants to live his life, because he always leaves, right? He's always like, nah, I want to go back. And then he leaves and he
left
back.
again.
He did it again.
Well, I think my only argument for that, I mean, I generally agree with what you guys are talking about. I mean, I would see his fantasy. I think you could have gone back into some things that were touched on in even just the movies, like David dying. He could have been back with David. Like Ruth was not a good one. He could have been back with Ruth in the 1930s. But specifically, what I was thinking about was. I
think you meant Edith Keeler, but okay.
Oh, sorry. Ruth is from Shore Leave. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
His Academy love.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. Thank you very much for. But it's
Alan
just
wanted to
just
saw
let
you
it
in the
go.
comment section.
it was so weird because he was like he got it was like Butler his dog and you're like who's Butler? What? I didn't know he liked dogs. Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
he liked
I know
horses.
this was like William Shatner's fantasy. It's like
Yeah.
dogs, horses, eating,
But no,
Hair
but
pieces.
but the
chopping wood.
but the only thing that I would say that kind of does make sense, and it's actually going back to that Ruth scene, is that or specifically, and we had talked about this before, but in Naked Time, in the Naked Time, he talks about no beach to walk on. Like that's Kirk's like secret like fantasy or whatever. Is that in order to be a starship captain, he has to give up this other life that he also really wants, which is to have a family and have love and connection and whatever. But I think there's two things. One, so that makes sense that would be his family. But the two things are that one, you've seen him go through a double realization. One is like through his arc through the movies is him having accepted to become an admiral, then going back to being a captain and realizing that's his first best destiny. And then the other thing was this, he had the chance of the fantasy type thing in Star Trek V with Cybok, and he says, "No, I need my pain," So it feels like he's pretty reconciled, with all these things, and I don't think that because of that, I don't think that this would be his fantasy.
Yeah, 100% it's not. I don't know why this was chosen because it was pretty invested in. It wasn't like,
I
like
will
it
tell you
seemed
that I have a
okay.
theory
Do you know why?
why. Yes, because I think that these fantasies are actually not Kirk and Picard's fantasies. I think they are. So it's just a theory, but they're Ronald D. Moore and Brandon Braga's and all the writers of Star Trek's fantasy because that's what their life is. Their life is they're at the Paramount lot 12 hours a day. They have no life. They have no family. And so then when they think, oh, what would I want my fantasy to be? Like that's
Their fantasy is like they want to get away from all these people.
but they yeah, that's they've sacrificed like having a normal life basically to be writers on the show. So
I don't know. Maybe.
Right, what I guess.
I don't know. I think Patrick Stewart and William Shatner just wanted to ride horses.
Oh, for sure.
oh yeah, that totally was a thing. Oh, hello, this is my dog. Okay. Okay. And then Kirk gets over his little fantasy pretty quickly too. It takes him about 2 seconds to be like, well, I jumped over that ravine 50 times and now
And now it's too easy. Let's go.
I didn't feel the danger anymore.
We didn't feel the danger. Let's get out of this impossible trap.
let's just walk out.
Let's just walk out. Yeah.
Oh, they rode out.
They rode out, but also, like, how did that thing just appear? Like, does it just know? And they're just like, we want to leave. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Here's the exit.
Well, and then that leads to one of the other plot holes is that they go back. Okay, I was really paying attention to this time. They go back right before the everything. And they they could have gone back like 2 weeks and killed Soren in his sleep or something.
I know, right? It's so stupid. It's such a stupid thing. It's like, I know exactly where I want to go. I want to go 5 minutes before everything gets blown up. Like, what? You should have went back. Like, why didn't you go back to the 10 forward when you're just talking to him about how time is the fire in which we burn? You could just arrested him there.
Or been like, oh, look, a phaser.
But even if he would have shown up,
speaking of burn,
he could have showed up like a half hour earlier and just and show up right behind Soren on his little hilltop thing. When he was talking to Picard, he could have showed up behind him there. But this is the other problem to me is that wait a minute, doesn't he go back in time? Doesn't that mean that the other Picard's there as well? So when he'd go back in time, there'd be 2 Picards and a Kirk.
You would think, because he shoots Yeah, because they go back to the time when he's shooting him when he's crawling through that little hole in the field.
No, he goes back to specifically the time where Picard like shows up in front of Soren, and then they redo the same shot, but then it's Kirk. But I'm like, well, the other Picard would be right there if
I
they're
don't,
going
but I
back in
don't think
time.
it's like that. I think it's a little bit weirder than that. I don't think it's like going back in time. I think it's like re-entering your body at a certain point.
He quantum leaped
Yeah, basically.
the
Yeah,
moment.
exactly. Yeah, he archered himself into himself.
I don't know.
I don't know
Like,
either. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like,
but
It's
also the
like he
other
was like,
thing,
I was so bad at fisticuffs that I had to bring somebody who's really good at fisticuffs with me this time.
that's
right,
right.
right.
And he doesn't even do the double punch. It's like
Well,
last fight
Kirk doesn't do
ever.
that.
No. Well,
Kirk just does a
I think
one
it's
one
really
fist.
great to see
Oh, he
Kirk
does
do
the.
fistic.
Ugh.
Did Kirk do that?
Oh
No,
He
I
yeah.
did,
don't
did
think
he?
so.
Oh yeah, he did.
No,
100% he did.
no.
I guarantee he
No,
did.
Okay.
that's a Bourbon era fighting.
Yeah, if you can
I
find
don't
a
think
clip
so.
of Kirk fighting that way, then I like to see it. But I think I'm with Alan on this one.
Well, I can't
Yeah,
because
because
I'm
he
But
using
just
my
does
phone. I can't search for it.
classic fisticuffs.
but isn't it? It's great to see Kirk do fisticuffs because he doesn't really do them in the movies that much. He's got that one fight with Cruge, and I think
I
that's
know,
it. And
like his fight with Soren was kind of reminiscent of like the original series. I mean, it's a little kind of funny now they're elderly, but you know, it kind of harkened back to the glory days of the TOS.
but the other plot, not whole but inconsistency, is when he brings back Kirk and they have the fight with Soren. That fight lasts like twice as long as the fight that he has with Soren the first time, and then he runs out of time. You know what I'm saying?
I always love too,
Hmm.
like how he does a classic bad guy monologue when he has like Kirk dead to rights. It's like, hey, history says you're dead. I'm like, why don't you just fucking shoot him instead of giving back keep the drop on you? Oh my god, it drives me crazy in movies.
He's
It's
like,
like
I
stop
gotta flick
talking and
this
just
little thing on my gun so the
pull the
baby comes
trigger.
over to the side.
I'm the man who killed. I'm going to be the one who kills you. I'm like, stop talking and just pull the trigger. God. But
Drama,
yeah,
drama.
that's just
Any other? You guys have any thoughts about the fight with these three old guys?
It's just a fight with
it's
three old guys. It's pretty lame. There's
it's
nothing exciting
it's
about
pretty
it.
lame. Yeah.
This whole part
Yeah,
of the movie is just brutal.
right. And not only that, but then the ending is just Soren gets blown up in a big explosion. I'm like, oh, like all the other Hollywood movies of the era.
Yeah,
Now, what's interesting is I remember seeing that. I'm like, that was a disappointing ending. I kind of wish it would have been something a bit more dramatic. And it turns out that there was an original ending
Oh
that was
yes.
filmed, and I watched it this afternoon. And the original ending is that Soren shoots Kirk in the back,
hmm.
which
Test
is
audiences
not.
did not like that.
Say who what?
The test audiences did not like that.
No, but to me that's actually like a better ending than the ending of his like he's on the bridge and then the bridge blows up and the bridge falls on him and stuff. Lemire,
N-
Alan, anybody?
neither one did the Kirk
Nah,
character justice. Like
nah.
getting shot in the back is a terrible way for Kirk to go down, and just the fact that again we don't feel the stakes in this movie that Kirk is like sacrificing himself for any sort of greater good. Like if people were dying around him or scared that they were gonna die, like he was like in the middle of the shit, sacrificing himself for people we care about or know. But there's nothing. I don't know who he's protecting. It's
Yeah,
like
it doesn't make any sense. Like
yeah.
I personally, this is what I think how they should have ended the movie. They should have fought Soren because Soren also gets sucked into the Nexus, which so that doesn't make any sense because there's a Soren in the Nexus, right? So he's still in there. Just because Picard leaves doesn't mean that he sucks Soren back out. right? So they should have fought, like all three of them should have fought in the Nexus, and beaten Soren in the Nexus, and then when they leave, they all go back to their original wherever. So Kirk goes back to the Enterprise B. Picard goes back to the planet, and Soren is either alive or dead in the Nexus. And then you give Kirk his original kind of heroic ending, right? Which he just accepts. He's like, this has to happen the way it originally happened, right? So he kind of steps back into it, and you'll get like a great like, I accept my fate. I'm gonna die a hero, and everybody's gonna know about it, et cetera, et cetera. And then he dies, and then that's how the movie ends.
Yeah, like his death was way more heroic in the first part of this movie than it was
100%,
in the
yeah.
end of this movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because nobody knows about it, right?
Yeah.
Although
they in a pile of rocks now on a no-name planet nobody cares about.
Yeah, but wait a second. But they do know about it because, okay, so Picard buries Kirk on Viridian 3, and
Why
then
did he go through that trouble to do that?
I don't know, but they must have recovered his. But they must have recovered his body, right? Because he's in that science lab in the Picard in Picard, right?
Yep.
But also, William Shatner wrote a novel called, I think, The Return, and in The Return, the Borg go and recover Kirk from his shallow grave on Viridian 3, and they turn him into Locutus 2, basically.
It's a crazy book. Yeah,
You've read it?
Wild one. I have read it. Yeah, and it was. Oh yeah. It's many years ago, but yeah, it was just off the wall.
You know what I want to read? I want to read more about Harriman, like after, like what happened to the Enterprise B.
There are books, there are novels with Harriman as a central character. So I don't know what he ended up doing, but
I imagine him just panicking all the time.
He got all of his equipment on Tuesday, and then everything was good.
Everything was fine.
Yeah.
I like the Kirk death. I think that worked quite well, and the way that Shatner played it was good, and he does that moment where he just goes, "Oh my," and then I like
Shatner's performance. Don't get me wrong. I think he does really well. I think it's great. Like it's moving. That "Oh my" line is fitting and perfect. But the other thing is, like, I guess he doesn't die alone. Right? Like, that whole thing is just kind of washed away.
I knew I wouldn't die because the two of you were with me.
I do not understand.
I've always known I'll die alone.
He does die alone. He doesn't die with any of his friends. He dies with this guy that he's just met two minutes ago.
No, that's, I don't know.
When he says I'm going to die alone, he means he's not going to be with Kirk and McCoy and Spock.
I don't think that's true. I think when he says I'm going to, unless that's explained, I don't think that's true. I don't think that makes sense to me, because I think what he's saying is I'm going to die alone means I'm going to die in a situation where I've made sure everybody is safe. And so I die alone because I'm sacrificing myself so that everybody who I love and care about lives.
That's a good interpretation. It's not my interpretation, but I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, so that's why I said that this scene was like it was well done between Patrick Stewart and William Shatner. It's just the circumstances kind of sucked, but the dialogue and the moment, like it was well done.
Well, I love this idea that he spent his life on the bridge, but the bridge crushed him in the end.
Man, who put together this platform for Soren? Whoever the contractor was, he needs a suit. Like, there was a lot of metal fatigue there. I don't know.
It's probably what that contractor's in the Nexus, and Soren's going back to get his money back.
Who built this thing? It's like the chains are falling apart, the bolts are coming out of every friggin' piece of metal is like bent. Like, man, it's poorly made.
Someone once told me that time was a predator that stalked us all our lives. But I rather believe that time is a companion who goes with us on the journey, reminds us to cherish every moment. because he'll never come again.
Okay, let's get to the last scene. The very last scene. I always love the last scene of this movie. The last scene being it's Picard and Riker, and they're kind of reminiscing. It's kind of one of those moments at the end of a lot of episodes where it's Riker and Picard reminiscing or talking about something, and I think that line always stayed with me when Picard says, "It's not what we leave behind, but how we've lived," and I always thought, oh, that's a good advice to live by, to not be preoccupied with all this stuff that you've accomplished per se, but like that you lived a good life, you know. But then Riker kind of ruins the moment by saying, "I'm gonna live forever." I'm like, what? Did you not watch the movie? I don't understand what you're saying.
I'm sorry. Are you some sort of superhuman? Because you will die.
Yeah, but also like that line from Picard, I think it's meant to be like, oh, this is what Picard has learned. But how does he learn that? Like, how does he get from, like, you know, like that's a lesson, yeah, but it's not something that he's learned throughout the movie.
No, I don't think it. No, I see what you're saying, and I feel like it could have been that. I think that's what they were trying to do with this idea of like, oh, he had this regret of this other life, but really he's happy with the choices he made because he's got this fulfilling life now. But when every time I watched it, I always thought, oh, that's what he was thinking at the beginning of the movie. That's what he believed in the beginning of the movie, and it's still what he believes at the end of the movie. So it's not so much like he learned something, but you feel like he would learn something more in relation to his brother dying and something about death and something.
Yeah, like he. I think that
He
the
did
problem
learn
is that
something.
there's
He
like
learned that he wanted to have a kid, and then he did with Beverly.
Like a long
well, but that's the
time
thing.
later,
There's like pieces missing, right? Which is like
he
you
had
get the sense.
he had 80-year-old sex with Beverly.
Yeah, like you get the sense that he wants a family, maybe, or like he wants to have kids, maybe, but it's never really explicitly stated, right? Like you never get that from the actual movie, right? He doesn't. They don't actually like commit to it and say, yeah, this is what he wants, right? Like if they were going to do that, he would have had there would have been a scene where he's like, listen, guys, I'm stepping away from Starfleet. I'm going to go find. I'm gonna go try and date this Crusher girl over here, and then we'll see if we can have some kids, and then yada yada. Let's see if we can make this work. But they don't do that, right? It's just like they gloss over this entire plot, which is supposed to be the main plot of the story. So there's nothing interesting about his character. The only thing that makes that character interesting throughout the movie is actually just Patrick Stewart's performance, because he's just so good. But nothing in the writing or the plot actually indicates any sort of like change or anything meaty thematically.
Alan?
It's a bad movie.
Any other thoughts?
Does he even have a scene with Crusher in this movie?
I don't think so.
Yeah, like they don't there's a lot of missed opportunities here.
Yeah, they don't really interact. I mean, they're on the same boat together
At some point.
at some point.
But yeah, I like the final scene. I mean, there is some nice moments there. I always get a little fuzzy there when Spot is found, and then Data's crying tears of lubricant or something. I don't know what he's
urine.
Yeah, he's got like yellow tears. But it's it's a sweet moment, and
yeah, like
that's a nice little close to his emotion chip arc. And
why is he even able to do that?
I'm not sure. I always thought it was funny. I'm like, why? I was like, can he not cry without actual tears? I mean, I feel like I would be able to understand that he is sad, yet sad with joy or whatever. It's like, I am happy, but I am crying.
Yeah. Dude, at some point,
without having him leaking something.
Yeah. At some point, Noonien Sung was like, well, I better put in these little tear injectors in his eyes just in case he gets an emotion chip and a cat in the future.
But and I think, and I always chuckle at that moment, which I believe when Red Letter Media did their deep dive on Next Generations, noted that that Picard received that very valuable artifact from his mentor in the chase. And in this one where he's looking for his photo album, he picks it up and kind of tosses it aside. I'm like, but you said this was such a rare, priceless artifact from
It's
a
not the
long dead
things
civilization.
you leave behind that matter,
He's like,
Alan.
it's like,
It's
I
the
found my
friends you
photo
make
album.
along the way.
Yes, yes.
Okay, speaking of friends along the way, let's do our ratings and see if we're still going to be friends afterwards. Okay, so out of 10, let's talk about our final thoughts and our ratings. Let's start with Alan.
Well, let's say, I'm a walking contradiction with this movie. It's like it's stupid, but I love it. I think it just come out at the influential time in my life where I was like 13, and and I was really into Star Trek, and there's so much Star Trek then, and I think I just have a lot of nostalgia for it. But as an adult, and logic examining it, you see that it's not a great movie. But it's super entertaining, so I have very conflicting thoughts about this. So it's hard to give it high marks based on all the problems. But I just had such a good time. I guess I got to give it somewhere like maybe a 7 out of 10.
All right, Namir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat. Like initially, I really did not like this movie, even though we probably saw it at the same time, and I enjoyed watching it with a crowd. But I was still like, this is not a great movie. Like it's like Phantom Menace, right? Like you watch and you're like, oh, this is amazing, but deep in your heart that it's not great. So it's the same thing. But actually, when I watched it again, it wasn't as bad as I thought. The characters really kind of held it together, so it was enjoyable. So if you just forget about the plot holes, it's still a fun watch. So I don't think I can give it a 7 though. That feels like good movie territory. So I'm gonna give it like a 6. I'm gonna give it a 6, and one more argument away from a 6.5, but I'm gonna say 6.
Yeah, I think I feel a little bit conflicted about it because it's obviously not great and has all these plot holes and missed opportunities. That's 100% for sure. But the movie looks and feels good, and it's got these really great moments in it, like the saucer separation and the crash. And I love seeing the Next Generation kind of world, like the TV world, on the big screen. And even though I don't think it's as good as First Contact, I think I've probably seen it more than First Contact, because sometimes like a crappier movie is easier to just throw on and kind of watch while you're doing something else, as opposed to, this movie's really good, so I gotta save it for a special occasion. I'm gonna block off a chunk of time and that kind of stuff. So I think I'll give it sort of like it's like a 6 out of 10, but it's a nostalgic 7 out of 10. So I'll give it like a 7. I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, that seemed like a reluctant 7 though.
Yeah, I feel like that's exactly how I feel. The nostalgia just bumps it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't, creatively, it doesn't deserve it, but this nostalgia that gives it the highest.
Yeah.
ranking.
It's like the same as finding like a bag of Doritos in your cupboard that you're like, how old are these Doritos? Maybe 2 years. I don't know. But you still eat it, and it's still okay.
That's where in the future, the things we've done instead. Let's just push the button, we'd be better.